She laughed like it was a joke. "You can't handle a woman like me." I should have let it pass, but instead, I looked straight into her eyes and said, "Try me tonight." That was the moment everything changed. The evening began like any other, casual, unremarkable, almost forgettable. I had stopped by to see my friend, and we'd spent hours on games, snacks, and meaningless jokes. But as the night stretched longer and his energy faded, he excused himself, leaving me alone in the living room. I hadn't planned to stay, but something about the warmth of the space, the soft hum of the lamp in the corner, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee kept me rooted in place. It was then that she walked in, his mother. Graceful without even trying, her presence shifted the atmosphere. She carried herself in a way younger women rarely did, not chasing attention but commanding it effortlessly. Her hair was pulled back loosely, her expression calm, though her eyes carried a knowing glimmer that always unsettled me. She smiled at finding me still there, teasing lightly that I must be more comfortable here than in my own home. I laughed, trying to play off my nerves, and for a few minutes, it was harmless banter, her asking about my studies, me asking about her work. But then came the moment I wasn't prepared for. I don't remember what exactly triggered it, something I said with too much confidence, maybe. She leaned back, crossing her arms, a mischievous smile tugging at her lips. And then she laughed. It wasn't the kind of laughter meant to humiliate, it was deeper, warmer, laced with challenge. "You can't handle a woman like me," she said, her tone playful but edged with certainty, as if she knew the line between us and wanted to make sure I did too. That should have been the end of it. I should have laughed with her, nodded, and let the joke fade into the air. But instead, something in me stirred, a mix of stubbornness and an undeniable pull I had been ignoring for too long. My heart pounded, and before my mind could stop me, the words slipped out, "Try me tonight." The room seemed to hold its breath. Her smile faltered just slightly, the confidence in her gaze flickering into something else, curiosity, maybe even disbelief. I could feel the weight of my own words hanging between us, reckless and bold, yet truer than anything I'd ever admitted out loud. For a long second, she simply studied me. Her laughter had quieted, replaced with silence thick enough to feel. And in that silence, I realized something had shifted. It was no longer just playful teasing. It was a challenge answered, a line redrawn. That was the beginning, when her laughter, meant to dismiss me, turned into the spark that would change everything. The house grew quieter as the night wore on. My friend's door had closed an hour ago, and the sound of the television had faded into a soft hum of silence. I could have left right then, but I didn't. Something about the air felt different, heavier, charged in a way that urged me to stay. When she reappeared, it wasn't with the playful laughter from earlier. She moved with a slower grace, a kind of deliberateness that made me hyper-aware of every detail, the subtle sway of her steps, the loose way her sweater draped across her shoulders, the faint lines of weariness at the corners of her eyes. She wasn't putting on a show, she didn't have to. Without asking, she went to the kitchen. I heard the soft pop of a cork, the faint trickle of liquid pouring into glass. When she returned, she was holding 2 stemmed glasses of wine. The way the lamplight caught the red surface, the faint swirl with every step, it all seemed rehearsed, though I knew it wasn't. She handed me one, her fingers brushing mine as she did. A small thing, easy to dismiss, but the warmth of her touch lingered longer than it should have. My chest tightened, my throat dry, though the glass was cool against my palm. "You don't usually stay this late," she said casually, settling onto the couch across from me. Her tone was even, but I couldn't stop noticing, the way her hair caught in the light, the faint trace of perfume drifting across the room, the calm but guarded way she breathed. She wasn't just a friend's mother anymore. She was a woman, sitting across from me, aware of the tension she had unknowingly, or maybe intentionally, created. That night, with nothing but a glass of wine and the quiet of an almost sleeping house, the atmosphere shifted. We both knew it. Neither of us dared to say it. The wine loosened the silence between us, though not in the way I expected. It didn't turn the night into laughter or playful teasing. Instead, it peeled back the layers of small talk and left us exposed in something quieter, heavier, more real. We sat on the couch, closer now than before. At first, it was harmless, her asking about my future, me stumbling through half-formed plans and uncertain dreams. She listened intently, her head tilted slightly, her expression softening in a way that made me feel seen rather than judged. And then, almost naturally, the conversation shifted toward her. She spoke of her younger years with a nostalgic glow in her eyes, but soon that glow dimmed. She admitted, in half-whispers, that life hadn't unfolded the way she once imagined. You get to a certain age, she said, swirling the wine in her glass, and you realize the things you thought would last forever, don't always. Her voice was steady, but there was something fragile underneath it, something she hadn't meant to reveal. I didn't interrupt. I let the words linger between us, giving her space to fill the silence if she wanted to. She sighed, a sound that carried more weight than any sentence, and for the first time, I saw beyond her confidence, the loneliness she kept hidden behind polished smiles and effortless poise. I suppose I laugh too easily, she said with a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It's easier than admitting I miss being really understood. That confession struck deeper than I expected. I wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, that she deserved more than fleeting laughter or surface-level comfort. Instead, I found myself leaning just slightly closer, my hand resting on the cushion beside hers. Not touching yet, just near enough that the warmth radiating from her skin pulled me in. Her gaze dropped to the small space between us, and for a heartbeat, she didn't move. Her breathing shifted, slower, deeper, as though she was carefully weighing the danger of what she had just allowed herself to reveal. I didn't push. I simply stayed there, steady and silent, showing with presence what words would only cheapen. And in that fragile moment, the distance between us felt thinner than ever, not just physical, but emotional, as if some invisible wall she had built for years was finally cracking. It wasn't laughter that defined us now. It was honesty. And that honesty was far more dangerous than any joke. The room felt smaller as the night deepened. The lamplight seemed dimmer, the silence heavier. We weren't strangers, yet we weren't exactly familiar anymore either. Something had shifted, our roles no longer fit as neatly as they once did. She leaned back against the couch, her wine glass now resting on the table, her posture more relaxed than before. But her eyes kept finding mine, holding for a second too long before darting away. I felt the same pull, the same hesitation, as though each glance carried both invitation and warning. We spoke less now. The words we did share were softer, weighted with things unsaid. A quiet laugh escaped her lips at something clumsy I said, and in the aftermath of that laugh, it happened. Her hand, gentle, deliberate, rested on my knee. It was the kind of touch that could have been brushed off as casual, friendly, even motherly. But it wasn't. Not this time. Her palm lingered just a little too long, her fingers curving ever so slightly as though testing the ground between us. I froze, but not in fear. More in awe of how something so small could unravel me. The warmth of her skin seeped through the fabric of my jeans, grounding me, electrifying me at the same time. My breath caught, and my chest tightened as I tried to hide just how much that touch affected me. She noticed. I saw it in the flicker of her eyes, the way her lips pressed together as though she were second-guessing herself. For a moment, I thought she would pull away, retreat back behind her composure. But I didn't move. I let her hand stay. When our eyes met again, the air thickened. There was no laughter now, no playful teasing to cover the silence. There was only the weight of her touch and the unspoken understanding that something dangerous had just begun. I wanted to say something, but the words failed me. Instead, I shifted slightly closer, not enough to startle her, but enough to make it clear that I wasn't running from this. That I didn't want to. Her fingers pressed just a little firmer, the smallest confirmation that she felt it too. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was simply the first touch, quiet, hesitant, yet powerful enough to change the rhythm of the night. And in that fragile moment, I knew there was no going back. The space between us seemed to shrink without either of us moving. The cushions dipped, the distance felt almost non-existent, and suddenly our knees brushed together. A light, accidental touch perhaps, but neither of us pulled back. Instead, the contact lingered, silent and telling, as if both of us were waiting to see who would flinch first. Her eyes softened, though I could see the conflict in them. She tilted her head slightly, studying me with the kind of focus that made it hard to breathe. For a moment, it felt as though she was searching for answers in my face, answers to questions she hadn't dared to ask aloud. Then, with a quiet steadiness, she reached over. Her fingers lifted gently, brushing a loose strand of hair away from my forehead. It was a gesture so small, so natural, one she could have easily passed off as nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not when her fingertips lingered just a little too long, tracing across my temple as if memorizing the shape of me. The touch carried weight. It wasn't playful. It wasn't careless. It was intimate, careful, almost hesitant, as though she wasn't sure if she was crossing a line or finally acknowledging the one we had already stepped over. My hand moved without thought. I caught her wrist, softly, not to stop her but to keep her from pulling away too quickly. The skin beneath my palm was warm, delicate, and alive. For a heartbeat, she froze, her breath catching as our eyes locked. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. But in the silence, the truth hung heavy, this was no longer accidental. This was deliberate. Her hand trembled faintly in mine, not from weakness, but from the weight of the choice before her. I held her gently, not demanding, not pushing, just letting her know that I didn't want the moment to vanish. Her lips parted, as though she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. The closeness between us was charged, fragile, almost unbearable in its intensity. I could feel the warmth of her breath, the faintest shift of her body leaning toward me, and my heart pounded against my ribs with the force of everything I wasn't saying. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't an embrace. But it was more powerful than both, the brush of her fingers in my hair, the softness of her wrist beneath my touch, the silent understanding that we had stepped beyond friendship, beyond roles, into something we couldn't easily define. Closer than intended. Closer than either of us had ever meant to be. The moment stretched so thin it felt as though even the smallest movement might shatter it. Her wrist still rested lightly in my hand, our closeness undeniable, yet she suddenly drew in a sharp breath and shook her head softly. "This can't happen," she whispered, her tone firm but her voice carrying a tremor she couldn't quite hide. She tried to pull her hand back, but I didn't let go. Not tightly, not possessively, just enough to tell her that I wasn't willing to dismiss what was happening between us. Her eyes searched mine, wide and conflicted, as though she was fighting two truths at once, the life she was supposed to protect, and the desire she didn't want to name. She swallowed hard, looking away, but I could see her resolve crumbling in the way her shoulders lowered, the way her breathing quickened. "I'm too old for games," she said finally, her voice quieter now, almost fragile. "You don't understand the risk." I leaned closer, not with reckless boldness but with quiet steadiness. "I don't see you as a risk," I said softly. "I see you." She blinked, startled by the simplicity of it. Her lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, all she could do was stare at me, caught between disbelief and the aching need to be believed. Her hand trembled in mine, and I shifted slightly, my thumb brushing gentle circles across her knuckles. It was a small gesture, but the effect was powerful. I felt her tension falter, felt the tiniest exhale of surrender slip past her lips. She whispered again, though this time her words lacked conviction. "People wouldn't understand, then let them misunderstand," I murmured, my voice calm, even. "What matters is that I do." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was fragile, tender, like glass catching the light. Her gaze softened, her resistance giving way to something more vulnerable. She didn't lean in, didn't collapse into my arms, but the shift was there, the barrier she had clung to so tightly was breaking, piece by piece. Her hand, once trembling, stilled beneath mine. And in the warmth of that quiet, unspoken agreement, I knew she was allowing herself to believe, if only for a moment, that what we shared wasn't reckless, it was real. It wasn't a declaration, not yet. But it was a promise. One drawn not in words, but in the steady press of her hand against mine, in the way her eyes lingered on me like she finally saw me differently. And for the first time that night, I felt she wanted this as much as I did. The night had stretched into something neither of us could have predicted. What began as laughter and teasing had unraveled into confessions, touches, and truths neither of us planned to share. And now, as the hours bled into the first traces of dawn, the house was wrapped in a silence that felt softer than before. The lamp still glowed in the corner, casting a warm, golden haze across the room. Outside, the faintest suggestion of morning peeked through the curtains, a pale light brushing against the edges of night. We hadn't moved far, though everything about us had changed. She sat close, her hand still resting in mine, our connection quiet but unbroken. Her head lowered slightly, and for a moment I thought she might pull away, retreat into the safe distance she had always kept. But instead, she leaned gently against me, her cheek coming to rest against my shoulder. The weight of her was light, almost cautious, yet the trust in the gesture sent a deep calm through me. I shifted, careful not to startle her, and let my arm slip around her shoulders. She didn't resist. Instead, she let out the faintest sigh, a sound not of tension, but of release, as though she had been holding her breath for years. For a long while, we said nothing. Words felt unnecessary, even clumsy compared to the simplicity of being this close. The steady rhythm of her breathing brushed against my chest, syncing with the quiet thud of my heartbeat. My hand rested lightly along her arm, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath the thin fabric of her sweater. I wanted to tell her everything, that she wasn't alone, that I didn't see her as unreachable, that what happened tonight wasn't just impulse but something far deeper. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence hold us, because sometimes silence speaks truer than words. Her fingers moved slowly, almost absent-mindedly, finding mine. One by one, they threaded together, until our hands were entwined. It was a small thing, subtle, but it felt like the most honest answer she could give me. She didn't need to say yes, or tomorrow, or always. That simple act was enough. As the faint light of morning grew stronger, we stayed like that, two people suspended in a fragile moment of peace, of promise. Not rushing toward anything, not naming it, not breaking it. Just letting it be. And in that quiet dawn, with her hand in mine and her head against my shoulder, I knew that whatever came next, something between us had already begun. That night didn't end with promises or confessions, it ended with silence, closeness, and the beginning of something neither of us could ignore. If you want to hear how this story unfolds, make sure to watch the full video, link is in the description.